just for the sake of, what do you call this thing? Like structure, you know? So that's what's good. We're just gonna be pacing up and down outside, but we're not gonna go out in the street, just kind of hovering about, because this is my structure, you know? And I don't want to change it. Crank Cat, what do you think? Do you agree that we should not be changing things unnecessarily? Hey! Do you agree? You were sitting underneath the car. Just like unruly ex-boyfriends. Anyway, I'm not gonna go very far. In fact, I should probably like sit what do you think? I wanted to come outside because, like I said, it's my structure. It's the thing that I got going. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, and then plus Situ bombs. Yeah, my pants are creased. We don't want anybody in these streets actually be hopping up and down, all up and like, oh, there's this chick, she's always wearing these creased pants on the streets. So let's just not go to the street, you know what I mean? Anyway, yeah, no, what I was talking, I'm sorry, there's like a lot of wind. I'm gonna be probably inside his house very shortly by now. I just want to walk out, you know, like fresh energy. Anyway, where was I? I was talking about the unnecessity. Thank you. The unnecessity of ubuthakathi. Guys, it ruins for you. Do you understand? Yeah, let's sing it. It just, it just utterly decimates you. And I am doing this video, Kajeku, as I am inspired by something that I watched on Netflix, and I should not have been inspired by it because frankly I should not have even watched it. But before I even get into that, I just want to first create a foundation, and in case y'all know that I'm all about that business, I'm always creating foundations first before I speak lofty, concluding, feeling, end resulting messages. I always just start with like some stories to inspire some people, you know what I mean? To like not do a strange thing, because like what is the point? Lomoya Lona that you can hear going bo 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 bo. I apologize, ne? I just wanted to keep my my structure aloft. And I happen to give what they look like out there in the wilderness, and now you see wonderful zazosums. Deliverance, y'all. You need deliverance. People, I'm trying to create a case for your seeking out of deliverance. Because, like I said earlier, when I was in the car, the inordinate hatred that you have for Christ and Christianity and my bad hair day is unfortunate. Moya ona is like, it's giving death spell. I'm kidding. Don't over spiritualize everything, Karabo. But like, yeah, okay, the wind has simmered down a little bit. I am trying to create a case, y'all, for your deliverance. Well, I mean, look, as Christians, we are constantly trying to create cases for people's deliverance. But right now, I'm trying to create a disincentivizing apologetics discussion from, if at all you have engaged in dark arts, stop. If you are thinking about it, don't go in. And if you've already been all about that business for a minute, I'm trying to get you to like, hey, seek out help, and urgently, because y'all have heard stories in the media. Y'all have heard stories everywhere, social media or mainstream news media. This wind is threatening the audibility of my message, but I trust that you can hear me anyway. Of what in the world extreme demonic possession can do through people. I am South African. I live in a country that is the worst one to live in as a woman because of people's involvement in the occult. Yes, that's not what the news says. The news does not say that South Africans are as crazy as they are because they're involved in occult magic. But everything is spiritual. These things start from somewhere, and oftentimes when a country goes into moral decline, when a nation falls apart at the seams, there tends to be something to account for it spiritually in the first place. before a country is completely ruined, even in the scriptures, there tended to be a severity of idol worship in that land, like something that is tied to a spiritual decadence that is negative, some spiritual upset, like something that people invested themselves in, that was the stuff of utter spiritual ruination. They tend to have been like with Sodom, they were spiritually ignoring a law, a rule. Love men as women and love women as men. They insisted upon sodomy, and their utter devastation then became a thing. In the days of Noah, the thoughts and intentions of mankind were evil continually, and then they were met with utter ruination. Ultimately, there tends to be some kind of issue spiritually in a country before it falls apart, socio-economically, socio-politically, whatever might be, even environmentally, like, as in creation groaning, natural disasters, the earth underneath that land sort of kind of giving, landslides, earthquakes, hurricanes, whatnot. They tend to be tied to a spiritual challenge on the ground. And I use challenge very loosely because it is a euphemism in the worst way. It's more like a putrefaction, a spiritual putrefaction down in the streets. There tends to be something spiritual going on, a spiritual compromise of sorts. Do you understand? And the South African issue is the setting up of people for failure by using spirits in order to control them. Witchcraft. The African epidemic is sorcery. South Africa is no different, seeing as it is in Africa. There is a problem with witchcraft in this land, and it has been lingering for many years, ever since apartheid ended. Black people, and I spoke the other day about how it is that even white people are starting to invest in it, other races basically are starting to invest in it, have just gone out of their way in the new South Africa, in the new democracy, while they're busy trying to get their own right, because historically they didn't have rights and whatnot. Now they do. In order to acquire their successes, their lives, their desires, like I spoke about those earlier, right? They are sabotaging each other. They have become so crazy competitive that now they're using spiritual means in order to outdo one another. And it is white-collar people alongside blue-collar people. The poorest of the poor are doing it, including middle-class people, all the way up until the lofty, all the way up to the wealthy. They're doing it. It is no longer witchcraft that is the sport of poor people. It was that once in Africa, in South Africa. It was the sport of the poor at some point. Do you understand? Because poor people did not know how in the world and the heaven to overcome their poverty, and this quick fix that is sorcery for them was just something that they very easily and quickly did, because, I mean, really, if this can give me money quickly, I'm going to do it. If this can give me this quickly, I'm going to do it. If this, now it's no longer the sport of the poor. Now it is the sport of, like I said, everyone. It has flattened that hierarchy. Everybody now is testing it. And so because everybody is testing it, the country's literally, there's a toxicity in the sky, some kind of a poison that has infiltrated the bones, the veins of South African citizens, and it is coursing, it is metastasizing, the poison is lethal, it's fatal. Absent of an antidote being administered, the country will die. And nobody appears to be staying hostilities against their own land with all of this sorcery. It's unsustainable. People cannot continue in this fashion and us be a growing concern, a thriving concern as a nation. This is what I'm saying. So, the spiritual disease in this country, being sorcery, has essentially lent South Africa over to tethering, very near, the end goal or the end result of a state failure, like a failed state. I keep saying witchcraft is like a state capture in South Africa, when everybody down in these streets is practicing it, all the way down from the lowest of the lowliest in society, living in a shack, up until the presidents of the country, the government officials. When the lowliest man and the loftiest man is doing this, lofty men of which are involved in secret societies, they're Freemasons, while the lowly are consulting local sangomas from the shack down the road. When everybody's involved in the spiritual harlotry, it's a state capture. The country is no longer operating as it ought. The mind, the collective consciousness of the country is no longer in one accord. We are not doing things as we ought. We don't have cognitive autonomy because we are made to make decisions in a tandem with the spells that are operating. There is a spiritual chaos in the sky. There is a spiritual chaos in the sky that, like I said, a collective consciousness that is being altered. It is being manipulated by spells. It is being manipulated by spells. And so because it's being manipulated by witchcraft spells, it is not going in what is the self-preserving best interest of the country at large, but it is going in tandem with unique individual selfish desires of people on the ground. Whatever your next door neighbor decides ought to be your end goal, your end result, you will do, things will be manipulated around your life in such a way so as to make that a reality. And so when you add a multiplier to it, and you've got millions of South Africans doing it now, including those that are in the highest of the echelons of society, like I said, municipal councillors, presidents, when you have got leaders of organizations, CEOs, right next to the dude in the call center, manning reception, the lady manning reception, as well as the cleaners, when they're all doing it, the national collective consciousness is altered to the whims of lay Janes, lay Joes, lowly, lofty, it does not matter, to alter the general overarching sentiment of a country. It is changing the heart of South Africans against their God. That's what I'm getting at. Witchcraft invests demons inside people, and these people who are demon possessed then can't do anything but inordinately hate Christianity and their God in a way that, of course, causes theft, murder, and destruction on the ground, because Satan can do nothing but steal, kill, and destroy, while Christ has come to give life and life abundantly. So, if at all Satan's prerogative is to steal, kill, and destroy, and people down in these streets are using his weapons, a nation in totality that has been altered in its collective consciousness will, in that mindless drone state, steal from itself, kill itself, and destroy itself. It'll be masochistic, it'll be suicidal. And only once we get to a point of utter ruination are people that are going to wake up, because that's the thing. When you defecate where you eat, you tend to not pick up that there is a problem until the whole house smells of feces. So only when things have gone too far and too extreme are South Africans going to wake up to see that we ruined our own country. We literally destroyed our own land. And this year is an olive branch. South Africans are refusing to let me speak, frankly. You have blocked me on social media to make sure that I'm not okay. My thing is, you are destroying the collective consciousness of the country by mind controlling everybody to do things that they don't want to do. You're taking wives that don't belong to you with Karabo. You are taking jobs from people that are skilled, so therefore causing, never mind a skills exodus in the sense that people are in the diaspora now, living in other countries that are skilled, but there are thoroughly, properly, entirely, comprehensively, and perfectly skilled people sitting at home, unable to get jobs because there's witchcraft blockages. There are witchcraft blockages on them. So when you drain skills from the land, you dumb it down. You dumb it down. You dumb down the entire country. You make sure that those who ought to have a voice to speak can't, because they're sitting at home and they're inaudible. Therefore, nobody can comprehend what they're trying to say. Like right now, you've sat on my chest making sure that I can't speak to some people because of nothing but jealousy, and the jealousy of which is uniquely and individually, in its own silo, the work of selfish people encircling my life that have no regard for the collective benefit or the collective health of the country. A nation is made up, its individual units contribute to the entirety of all of us all. We are made up of one person each. The collective is made up of individual units. That's what I'm getting at. So when you keep messing with individual units of people on the ground, selfishly in your own unique capacity as Karabo's best friend, or as Karabo's ex-boyfriend, as Karabo's whatever, you are at a multiplier to that. Literally, law of large numbers, where once you apply a multiplier to it, you will see on a Cartesian plane some kind of anomalous activity scattered as you plot these dots, right? You will see an anomaly that is a downward trajectory, almost exponential. I don't even think it's an exponential decline, although the past 10 years have been exquisitely horrific in this country in terms of what's going on, but it's been a steady decline, all right? It's been a steady decline, not so much an exponential one, but nonetheless an observable decline. It is an observable decline over years, but the thing about a steady decline is that it's when you start to feel the effects of it. It's like a cancer. When you start to feel the effects of the steady decline, that's when it's already too late. Like, with cancer, it's better to detect it early. But the disquieting thing about the early stages of cancer is that there's no pain. You are healthy, you're jumping up and down, you're swimming, you're athletic, you're running. Those are the early stages of cancer. But once you start to feel pain in your body, once you start to feel ouchy, and once you start to feel once you start to feel nauseous, once you start to feel bilious and you're vomiting all over the show, that's when it's late. That's when the cancer has metastasized to a point where you are probably now terminal. So, upon being symptomatic, you are essentially far gone. When you start to become symptomatic, you're far gone. It's almost over. You are dying now, and all that can be done is to make your death as comfortable as possible. Put you in as much morphine. I'm sorry for the wind. Put you on as much morphine as we possibly can put you on now, because this is you're terminal. Unless some medical technology is embarked upon that is going to retract a cancer this advanced, you should put your affairs in order. Start writing a will, in testament, a lost will, to start, saying goodbye to your kids. Start putting your affairs in order, because now you have got pains in your body, you're vomiting. It's too far gone, it has metastasized. Yeah, the destruction of a country as a result of some sin that is just ruminating. This wind is distracting me, okay? The destruction of a country tends to be gradual and undetected in its rudimentary stages when it is still curable. Do you understand? When the wind is properly, I'm pretty certain that it's really loud, right? When you can still detect the cancer. Sorry, when the cancer is undetectable symptomatically, but through only a what do you call this, a biopsy. Like if you have to do a biopsy to detect that you've got a cancer, Mara, largely you have no symptoms, you're asymptomatic, right? You're still treatable, you're probably okay. But a lot of people find out the hard way, which is why it is recommended by oncologists and doctors alike. This wind is making my life literally quite very miserable. That is why it comes highly recommended that you just get tests done, like mammograms, a yearly prostate exam, cervical exam. Just get tested, so you can detect stuff early. They recommend, do this like a self-test at home to check for lumps around your breast area, because the sooner you detect it, the better. Yeah, like basically knowledge is power, right? Knowledge is power. I have been trying to get South Africans to do a mammogram, like a self-check, but I've been blocked. I have been prevented. I have had people refuse that I should have any kind of semblance of a life, even in the slightest, like at all. They have said, I'm sorry, Karabo, okay? Life really sucks and I'm selfish. Life really sucks and I'm greedy. Life really sucks and I'm rapacious. Life really sucks and I have got a God complex. And so because I have got a God complex with life that really sucks, I'm gonna do what I want to do to you uniquely, thinking that Karabo, this is operating in a silo. This here is operating in a vacuum. Nobody's coming for anybody. And you are naive to imagine that anything's gonna give. You are naive to imagine that anything is going to ultimately suffice here, because I get to decide that you don't have a future. But you see, it's not just the people around my life that are making a decision that I don't get to have a future. It's people around South African people's lives that are making these decisions, therefore ransacking the collective health of the nation. And like a steady incline, or a steady decline, on a curve, a Cartesian plane, that ultimately is not an astronomical, what do you call this, like an exponential decline. Like it first starts out almost like a plateau, like a flat line that is obviously declining, but then it starts to decrease or decline at an increasing rate, therefore creating an exponential decline. But by the time you get to exponential decline stage, you're at stage 4 cancer. You are essentially terminal. Now you gotta go and set your affairs in order. Now you gotta tell some people that you're dying. Now you gotta say, look, I got 3 months to live, because you waited too long. However, doctors out here in these streets have been counseling you, saying, brother boy, sister girl, do a mammogram, do a cervical test, do a pap smear, do this, do that, wada fish paste, so that you can detect stuff real nice and early, and so therefore start going for treatment, and so therefore retract and enter into remission, so the country doesn't die. A failed state is made up of cancer type spreading activity. And there tend to be enough people that are doctor-like in the ecosystem to warn. I don't like the way that the filter is looking now, so I'm about to move inside. There tend to be people that are there to warn everybody around in these streets that, look, this year is not going to end well because I can see that there's some issues. Before symptoms start manifesting, like this kind of, like, I got thrown out of employment in 2014. At that stage, the cancer was, of course, in the body, but it was asymptomatic. People were not giving any kind of evidence that the country's about to die. But now we've literally got it communicated even in the news media that we are headed towards being a failed state, if not already a failed state. And the cancer causing or the carcinogenic properties of South Africa, in particular my country, is or are witchcraft. The carcinogenic issue is witchcraft. The thing that is cancer causing is witchcraft. It's witchcraft. Like, we have got a problem with utarati in the streets of this uneasy land. We've got a problem with utarati filter in it's too, it was, yeah, whatever. So maybe I should just go inside and develop, because ranong filter yang faila the carcinogenic issue or quality or like, yeah, the problem here that is cancer causing kibuloi abantu basemzansi bathanda ukuthakathana bafethu angazi ukuthi sizophola nini. I don't know ngofola nini. I have no idea when anybody's going to seek out medical attention, but unfortunately we are at a point now where we are symptomatic as a land, in the sense that now we've got the vomits, now we've got the pains, now we've got the cramps, now we've got the weakness in the body. Now we've got to seek out all different kinds of, like, what do you call this? Experimental medication, experimental trials that are not yet proven, but they're in human trial phase, to try and deal with this kind of aggression of cancer at this point. Because historically, this is the kind of stuff that a person should put their affairs in order. In 3 weeks, they're going to be dead. So the only way that you very potentially might live and see remission is if you then join a medical trial that you get approved for, that is experimental. It may or may not work. It could catalyze your demise, or it could put you in remission, but it's in the testing phase. So even the recovery then of this individual that has got the cancer is not guaranteed, but they've got to now lean on experimental medication, whereas before it was perfectly treatable because, like I said, you done did that pap smear, you found it early, and so now you're in remission. Let me go inside because I don't like the way that this filter is giving. Okay, yeah, okay, so we're done not done communicating. I'm in now. I'm inside. Hallelujah. Hope you're good, peachy, stellar, and in a neat little bunch. I was speaking about how it is that the carcinogenic property in this country is witchcraft. And we see it. It's everywhere. Like the symptoms that are now starting to manifest, because we are now already on a downward spiral that is exponential. It appears we are done for unless some kind of experimental trial gets done on us. We are properly just not going to make it. We see it, like, if at all this country is not already, it is certainly headed towards being a failed state. And if you look at countries like Haiti, like, everything has a root cause. Like, these nations that end up so debilitated as they are, there is a root cause. Let's just have a brief discussion, guys, about nations that are obviously failed states, or they're just struggling to cough, alright? They're struggling to breathe. As countries, there is an observable spiritual harlotry of sorts in that country. There tends to be. Haiti, they're besotted with voodoo. And the level of education there, alongside mental acuteness or awareness of the people on the ground, is so lack that literally don't nobody know how under heaven it is that it is able to continue to thrive as a nation. How people are able to wake up every day and do anything at all because of how it is that basic understanding is just limited in children all the way up to the adult population. If you want to do anything with yourself in Haiti, you literally have got to leave. You gotta move out. Evangelists get killed when they go there. There's just all these issues, and of course it's being run by gangs. Some years ago, there were even rumors of these gangs being cannibals, eating people. Like, it's just, what is the problem? Just like with South Africa. Witchcraft. Just a witchcraft state that leads to corruption. Before the destruction of Sodom, there was an issue with sexual immorality in that particular state. Nations that tend to have problems socioeconomically and sociopolitically, to a point of being failed states and irrecoverably so, no matter how much international aid they get, no matter how much people try to intervene, etc. There tends to be some kind of spiritual disease in that country that you can identify that makes them dumb. It's like the collective mindset of the people is such that it is self-destroying. It is obviously taken over by an entity, a principality, and it's running the outcome of people's lives. It is controlling how the country in totality functions. The leadership tends to be exorbitantly corrupt as well. There tends to be a break away from the God of the universe, what he has created us to be, who he has created us to be, how he has created us to be. There tends to be a breakaway from that. Look at what is presently now happening in the US. They're on a decline rapidly because of their complete disregard of basic things that they once upon a time appreciated and respected. The nation is falling apart. Everybody agrees that the US is currently under judgment. They're still a superpower, but they're on their way out. They're like Babylon. You gotta be filled with much food and indiscretion for you to be judged as a land. Do you understand? The collective consciousness of your country gets sterilized by some kind of spiritual compromise. Look at many of the countries in the Middle East, struggling even though they are rich with resources. Do you understand? To maintain some kind of stability of government, there is political unrest. There are powder keg, always waiting to explode because of their indiscretions against their creator. Their indiscretions against their creator and of course their hatred of Israel. And so many of them are struggling to be the powerhouse, the strong, sturdy, firm nation that Israel is. So that's why it's now this trembling cup. That's why it's now this cup of trembling. That's why it is a very heavy cup for all the nations, a cup of staggering. And all these nations that are trying to heave it away, they will surely be cut into pieces at some point. Their constant defeat, time and time again, is because of their rebellion against God. And the fact that their nations are struggling to feed people. There is a lack of comfort on the part of the regular man and the woman on the street concerning tomorrow. There's disquiet in women, lots and lots of it, because of a very iron fist way of looking at the patriarchy. It is not loving the way that Christ loved the church, and so the women there are unhappy. There's lots of political unrest, riotous are those nations. And for as long as they're like that, they will never thrive, they will never prosper. They will literally never ever prosper. Where a nation does a better thing by the people on the ground and in a rational sense that is in tandem with the way that God would have people be, even if they're pagan, there tends to be prosperity for that country. Do you understand what I'm saying? Or there tends to be peace, like joy, like tranquility on the part of the people. Liberations are like a thing that are respected. People don't feel tyrannically held hostage. Nations that have no regard for God, somebody on the floor tends to feel oppressed. Look at China. There is an inherent oppression in nations that have no regard for God. Look at, like, if at all, it's not, it's like two extremes, right? Where there is complete domination, total law and order, like a sovereign, a despot, like China. There is some kind of a maintenance of order in society, but it is with an iron fist. And stuff like that is a powder keg waiting to explode. It's only a matter of time before people riot. So there's no true stability and no true peace. Similarly, too, in the Middle East, it's a lot of iron fisting. However, in the United States of America, it is too much liberation. It's too much freedom. They're like Sodom. And so it's going to fall apart anyway, because that level of anarchy is never going to sustain a strong, thriving country. Do you understand? So on one extreme, it's anarchy, it's a purge. And then on the other extreme, it's a sovereign, a despot that is insufferable. It's suffocating. It is draconian. A draconian structure right next to a super liberal one is insufferable. Mankind needs to make the decision to serve God. Their king in the sky. You know how the people of God, the Hebrews, wanted a king, and the Lord told them through the prophet Samuel that y'all gonna have some problems when you get a king, because there is a potential in a human king to be extremely despotic or too liberal, therefore creating in the too liberal space too loose morals, Sodom, or in a despotic state, people that are just like literally getting through the day to not upset the despot. And so there is always striving on the ground. A powder keg of war. Revolutions rising up underground of people trying to come up against the government. There's always going to be that issue. But you see, when mankind honors God, when they worship the God of heaven, they're regulated by their consciences. They're regulated by their hearts. The law of God is written on their hearts. They do what is right based on what is a moral law, an absolute one that comes from an omnibenevolent God that got their back, and also a holy God that requires them to be a particular way. So women who love God gladly submit to husbands who also gladly love their wives as Christ loved the church. And so there's no striving in the family. Children are happy. And with the kids being happy, there then is a thriving society of people who feel free to worship God, to love God, but don't feel oppressed by the structures. Because you see, God is he's benevolent. He knows not to, like in the Middle East, their form of religion is extremely coercive and hostile against women. It is sapping and draining of the glory that God created in women. It requires them to completely conceal themselves, hide. And their idea of honor and respect for men is essentially like a diminished woman, like a completely diminished woman, like nothing at all that makes sense. Whereas God says to men that you must listen to your wives, their opinions matter, okay? Otherwise your prayers are going to be hindered. So there are consequences to being too harsh with an iron fist over women in the sight of a holy God. And submission is a requirement under godly girlhood. God insists that godly women submit and respect the patriarchy. But he knows that people have got a propensity within them to abuse authority. So he then counsels men to not be harsh to their children or their wives. And also to listen to their wives, because they've been put there in the environment for their edification, their betterment, their helper needs. They need helpmeet. They need help. Otherwise they would not have been created. So therefore, a man that feels like, you just shut up and be barefoot, pregnant in the kitchen and do nothing but, that is not a helpmeet. That is a woman that is a robot. That is a Stepford wife. And I mean, we all know what happens in the movie Stepford Wives and the Revenge of the Stepford Wives. Whenever there is a despotic regime in operation, there will be a revolution underground brewing that is ultimately going to attempt to coup the structure in question that is oppressive. That's why the women's liberation movement happened against men who are abusing authority. It created feminism out of women. It made women despise the authority of men when they would have loved it if only men had been responsible in stewarding the authority God had given them, right? Nations that are Christian, truly born again, like nations that love God, get that. So even though godly women are happy to submit under men, they understand that they are not under a tyrannical iron fist. And so it is a glad obedience, a glad submission, a willing and a docile, glad submission, because it is a loved submission. It is not a coerced submission. When people gladly worship God, happily embrace Him, there is peace in society. And a benevolent God knew how to create the balance between awarding authority to a leading structure, with also that structure not being so oppressive that people underneath it would rebel. God was so perfect in His design of the human ecosystem that He knew how to create a perfectly balanced environment that is harmoniously obedient to Him without striving. But of course we fell apart. So women are now making idols out of men. From now on your desire will be for your husband, while men are creating iron fist despotic households, and the result is just this like Shaka Zulu violence, a deal where women are rising up now to march and kids are entirely disobedient. So it's like I said, chaos all over the show. So that's why things fall apart in nations like China or even the Middle East, where it is that there appears to be a very strong order, like a gavel, like an iron fist authority, but there's still no stability. Like in those countries, there's still no order. That is why nations that are Christian are literally the most successful on the earth. Nations that historically, like nations that were strong in Christ, have always been thrived. The Lord gave them superpower status. It started out in England, right? In the United Kingdom. They fell apart, and then it was given to America, and they're now presently falling apart. Nations that have respected God's precepts, there was peace. There was true order. There was true tranquility. If it is possible, live at peace with your fellow men. Nations that have honored God, loved God, have tended to be democracies, and they have also tended to award religious freedoms to everybody else that is not Christian. Everybody else that is not a Jew. The Lord has given them religious liberties. Not the Lord, sorry, but what is this? The Christian leadership therein gave them religious liberties because they understood what tends to become of a country when you despotically and dogmatically insist upon one particular religion. There will be striving on the ground. God gave Christians wisdom to award in the nations where they established a Christian ethos, religious freedoms to everybody, because that's how God is. It is written in God's word that He stands at the door and He knocks. And if anybody will open for Him, He will then come in and dine with them and sup with them. Take my robes upon you, be clean, that you might be acceptable in my sight. He gives people an opportunity. He says, behold, I give before you blessings and curses, life and death. Therefore choose life. He does not impose it on you. He doesn't force it on you. God reigns rain, right, on both the wicked and the righteous. They both harvest because his common grace applies due to the fact that God Almighty is not a despot. He wants glad worshippers of his person, not forced ones. So in nations where he will thrive a country, he will thrive them because they largely worship him, they want him, but he will also award everybody else that's not interested in him liberties. So such countries are easy to live in. Everybody seeks refuge in them. They're trying to move over there because there's freedoms, right? Everybody is out here trying to live, was at some point. Now things are alright. The world is turning upside down. Everybody was at some point trying to live in the UK. Everybody was at some point trying to live in America. Everybody, countries in Africa are always just trying to move into South Africa. People therein, the citizens, because of the freedoms, the democracy that South Africa is. Nations that award religious freedoms tend to be Christian, and successfully anyway. So China claims to have religious freedoms, but look at how they're trying to change the Christian Bible. They're trying to force things down people's throats. They are, nations that are truly Christian, like founded on Christian principles. They're the ones that everybody else is out there trying to find refugee status in, asylum in, because of the fact that God has given wisdom to the Christians therein to not be despotic with religion, because he explained to us thoroughly in his word that there is no time in this entire existence of the earth where there will be complete righteous reigning, but for the 1,000 millennial reign of Jesus Christ, where I'm going to establish a righteous reign with indeed an iron fist, where I'm going to insist upon me being the one true worshipped God. But before then, you're not going to succeed as human beings to bring the kingdom of heaven on earth. I am the only one that's going to bring it on earth. What you are to do is make disciples of all nations. Evangelize as many people as you possibly can, that they might come and reign with me righteously for 1,000 years. But before then, there will be resistance. There will be a sword. I have come upon the earth not to bring peace, but a sword. So in countries where you have conquered as Christians and you have won the battle, you will establish a Christian ethos. But in it, you will not insist. He literally gave us wisdom. You will not insist that people all be Christian, because then on that day you're going to create no different a despotic regime like that which exists in the Middle East, in China, certain portions of the earth where it is that people are not truly happy and a revolution is brewing. It's only a matter of time before stuff gets overwhelmed because people are unhappy. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. So there definitely cannot be discovered on the earth at all any country other than Christian countries where you see a true prosperity of joy, a true success story of true joy, true peace among citizens of all different nationalities, of all different backgrounds, of all different persuasions and influences. There are no countries where there is true happiness among citizens on earth other than Christian nations. Literally, that is a thing. Nations that are Christian, everybody flees to them. When people there break out into the hives of anarchy against their government, or when they disagree with anything the government says, they have to flee to countries like, well, historically, right now things are falling apart, like South Africa, like America, like the UK, nations, and many of them in Europe that are Christian, that are founded on Judeo-Christian principles. People tend to flee there when their countries are actually pulling stunts, going awry on them. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. The Lord has proven, therefore, that the Bible is true, the Beatitudes. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the sons of God. Because where it is that we set base camp and where we conquer structures, where we win wars, we make life easy and habitable for everyone, even if they're not of us. Even if they're not of us. Do you understand? So, South Africa is falling apart because it used to be a free country. It used to be a democracy. And spiritual indiscretions on the ground are causing it to fall apart. Even though on the surface it appears to be a democratic nation, free, liberal, with us able to do whatever we want to do and practice our religion, we are being taken over by a spirit of sorcery. We are being taken over by a coercive spirit that has no regard for people's religious freedoms and any other freedoms at all. It on the surface is saying one thing, just like China. You've got freedoms to worship whatever God you want to worship. But you see, you will know them by their fruit. By your works you display that you're reprobate and you've never known me. Titus 1:16. Yeah. China claims to have freedoms, religious freedoms, so too does India. And yet look at the level of Christian persecution happening over there. It's because there is sentiment, low-key. There is a spiritual disease, a cancer, that is spreading in the country that is making what they say not what they do. They don't practice what they preach. They claim to be respectful of liberties because it's just the right thing to do according to international bodies. You don't want to get looked at as a despot. You don't want to get looked at as not catching up with the times or being tolerant. So on paper, they claim to be happy with people's freedoms so that they can be cool with the United Nations and Amnesty International and everybody. But then on the ground, you see the evidence. The fruit are being born in these pagan countries that they don't really, truly have any respect at all for people's liberties. That's when a nation starts to become a failed state and an investigatable state, according to international bodies. When a country is out here having no regard for its own laws. When some people are above the rule of law. Yeah, South Africa's like that now, right? It is no different now from anywhere in the Middle East out here. Yemen or Turkey. That's not in the Middle East, you get my point, but it might as well be, right? That's in Europe. But yeah, I love what Eric Stackelberg says about Turkey. He calls them NATO. NATO in name only. They belong to NATO only in name, because really they're not truly aligned to European nations in their sentiment, because they're more Middle Eastern than anything. They might as well just sort of kind of break away through the continental drift, like as with Gondwana land, to the Middle East. They might as well just suture themselves to the Middle East, because they're like there. Their heart is Middle Eastern, like proper. It's Arabic in the worst way. Yeah. Type thing. Continental drift. Just break off Turkey from Europe and just throw it somewhere in the Middle East there, and it'll be nicely able to fit in. Type thing. It is among the mutineers against Israel in the war, Gog and Magog. It is speculated that Gog could be either Recep Erdogan, or Vladimir Putin, or whatever version of these men may exist at the time of the Gog and Magog war, which I do believe is now. That's why I'm saying Erdogan, or who is this? Putin, are probably Gog, right? Largely it is speculated that it is rather Putin, but even if it's Erdogan, bottom line is the only reason why it would be speculated that Erdogan could potentially fit the profile of Gog is because, look, he's very Gog-esque in his demeanor. He can't stand Israel. He is outwardly defying even NATO in favor of his Middle Eastern sentiment that is unstable against the people of God. He is an attempter to heave away Jerusalem. He's one of the people that are beautiful candidates auditioning wonderfully to excellent prosperity for the role of Gog, as described in Ezekiel 38 and 39, right? Yeah, he's extremely Gog-esque, and so he might as well be, but I wouldn't be surprised if both Recep, Erdogan, Tayyip, whatever, alongside Vlad over there, are both involved in this whole Gog and Magog thing, just that the one will be minor in comparison to the other. Whoever it gets displayed Gog is, which I largely lean towards Vladimir Putin, or rather Russia, right? Yeah, whoever it is, I do believe, irrespective, both are going to be involved in the Gog and Magog war. Just, of course, with the one being small, yeah, in their influence compared to Gog, because Gog is the main dude that out here with a hook in his jaw, you know, on some, you know, creating this confederation of nations, coalition of nations out here trying to punch Israel or something type thing. Yeah, type establishment thing. That whole ridiculousness going on happens, right, because of man's indiscretion against God. Like, you claim, like, you know, NATO in name only, the way that Eric Stackelberg says of Turkey. You claim to hold fast to European principles that tend to be founded on Christian Judeo foundations. Turkey was among the first evangelized Gentile nation. Gentle, nothing about them is Gentile at all. I want to say Gentile nations. The churches in the book of Revelation are in Turkey. You know, Ephesus, Philadelphia, Thyatira, they were in Turkey type thing. They were, in the early days of the church, quite frankly, you know, one of the baddest Christian nations in the game, and now they've turned their hearts far from God, which is why Turkey is presently falling apart the way that it is. That's why they've got the socioeconomic challenges that they presently do. That's why there is practically like bordering on famine in the land. There are issues because of their indiscretion against God. Nations fall apart, not because of their policies, but because of their hearts towards God. Policies ought to reflect what's going on in the hearts of men, but men sometimes hook up policies because, you know, in front of everybody, like Freud's superego. It can account for this. Y'all know that I don't write off psychologists. I don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Their theories are, misaligned, theistic theories. They don't want to admit God, but they're largely right in diagnosing certain things. It's just that they're not prepared to admit that God is at the very be-all and end-all of the source of the core of everything. They just stop halfway, and so they tell people, go with your most basic instincts, your most carnal, base desires. Do what you want, kasinjalo. They're not wrong. They're not wrong when they say we're just like that. We're base as human beings, so might as well just cave into your most carnal desires. We are born depraved, dead in trespasses and sins, but the Bible says you need to put to death the spirit, by the Holy Spirit, the deeds of what? Your body. This depraved nature, you can't just run with it. So Freud and everybody gets to like halfway of the mark to realize that, okay, we're rotten, so let's just fly in the rotten space, but God finishes it off. He helps people get the full cycle. I already explained this in one of my other videos, right? Speaking about how it is that psychologists and theorists in this area are like undiagnosed theists. They are insincere theists. They are unfinished theists. They are embryonic theists. They are fetal theists. They want to be godly, but they just don't finish the job. They abort the story somewhere along the way. Yeah, but what it is that they come to the conclusions concerning their inferences, you literally can find foundation, getting their baseline in the Bible. People just don't want to finish the journey with God. That's what I'm getting at. Alright, cool. So I don't throw out Freud's theory of the psyche because he's onto something, and he uses that superego thing. The whole thing with the superego, basically society's view of you, causing your behavior, therefore inspiring your behavior because of man's inherent desire to be approved by fellow man. It regulates us. We regulate each other by the observation of what we each consider behavior that is acceptable in society. So we fashion our laws around our sentiment about what something ought to be, evidencing that foundationally we have got the law of God written on our hearts, such that we all come to consensus about what is right and what is wrong without anybody actually telling us. We just get it because the law of God is on our hearts. That's why again they don't finish the story. So Freud's theory of the psyche suggests a superego, right? He comes up with this whole theory of the superego, saying that our behavior is modeled by this view of what society thinks of us. So insofar as we imagine that people are going to frown upon something, we don't do it, or we outlaw it. And if we imagine that people are going to look gladly upon it, we then make it legislation, we then make it a precept, we then make it something that we ought follow, etc. type establishment thing. So just based on the potential perception of humanity, people, then come up with laws. They come up with laws for their countries. Like, you want to be embraced, you want to join the United Nations. You know how I was going to call them Palestine, but it's not Palestine, it's Philistia, like, whatever. I am pro-Israel. Let's just put that out there. We're not even about to get into this little wrestle in a cockpit. We're not doing it. But whatever. Let's just call them what they want to do. They want to be members of the United Nations, right? They like Hamas is whatever. They went and applied there to be members of the United Nations because they saw that the United Nations is out here happy to embrace them and humor them. What a fish face. So too did, I believe, Iran, right? So kind of applied to be members of the United Nations. Historically, they went. I don't even know. I'm not really sure why they went there. Type establishment thing. But I mean, in order to be a member of the UN, you sort of kind of have to have some kind of a moral code, right? You have to have a general humanitarian heart or a flair. But we all know that the UN is out here being diabolical and nefarious. It's not the kind of stuff that it started out being. The initial founding principles of it are fallen apart. They are now anti-Israel, where before they were happy to love Israel, because that's stuff is going to happen in the last days. The 10 kings are going to hand their power over to the Antichrist, and not that I believe that the United Nations are the 10 kings, but they are the foundations of it. They're the makings of it. They will spur up from this kind of coalition of nations with one another, being in a one world government-y type setup establishment. Thingy, my Bobby. The United Nations, having started out really meaning well and now they've gone awry, type establishment thing, in order to belong to them as a country, you sort of kind of have to have a sort of moral code of ethics. You have to qualify based on what is observed as your qualifiability as a country. Your qualifiability as a country to be part of the United Nations, right? You cannot be like a whole hard-knock, hectic, despotic regime that is kind of Hitler-esque, hating all things beautiful and, human sanctity. You can't belong to the UN. If at all you're a country of that crazy nature, you will be ostracized. You will be, you get my point. You will be what do you call this thing? A pariah. You will be like North Korea. North Korea cannot belong to the UN for obvious reasons. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, if countries want to belong to the United Nations or even bodies like NATO, right? If they want to belong to such bodies as these and have any kind of influence, voting power, yeah, they gotta look good on paper. So what do? They come up with legislation, policies, etc. that will get them approved by the UN as a country that can belong to the UN, a country that can have an influence in international courts and what a fish paste. They'll do that on the surface. Because it just makes sense. Because that's the super ego. You are regarding what other people think about you, what is right, what is considered right. That's why humanity, you are without excuse, for crying out loud. When you sin against the God of the universe, you're without excuse, because there is just so much going on in these uneasy streets of ours that evidences that we all inherently agree that the absolute law of God, right? The absolute truth of the law of God is true. Because we, as humanity, suck up to it. Even though we are disloyal to it. We suck up to the absolute truth. Even though we're disloyal. We suck up to the absolute truth, even though we're disloyal. By sucking up, I mean we fashion legislation in tandem with the absolute law of God. And then we sin. We ignore it. People are now above the rule of law. We come up with government. We fashion our legislation. If at all we want to be embraced by international bodies that are in kumbaya with each other, to God's law. What did that? The law of God written on our hearts. Freud calls it a super ego, but we call it eternity has been written on your heart. We call it the truth is absolute. We call it it's chilling on your inkleseo, and you're ignoring it. You're ignoring it. But we see that you know that it's there because look at your nation's legislations. They are eerily tending towards what God would rather have you do as countries. And nations that have fashioned their constitutions and their canon on largely the Bible and honor it tend to be those democracies, for crying out loud, where people flee to when everybody's out here shooting them dead. Countries that are free, that people run to when they want asylum. Woo-wee, that's early. Nah.